Let's talk a little bit about passion flower. So the year was 1569, and a Spanish physician, Nicholas Monardes, founded passion flower. And I put quotes around it because he founded it for the old world, meaning Europe's and such. But this herb had been being used for hundreds of years prior to him coming along, ever from North Carolina in the northern Americas all the way down to Peru. So this herb had been long used before it was founded by Nicholas Monardes and the Spanish conquistadors. It then took another 40 years for him to get the herb to Europe, and that's probably just due to the fact they had to walk across the country, get on a ship, and sail all the way to Europe. So it took the 40 years to get over there, and then it took even longer just for them to add it to the herbal repertoire. Before that, it was just used as an ornamental plant that people like to grow in their gardens because of the very exotic and almost alien look to the flowers. So there's a lot of Christian myths behind the passion flower, but I would like to go over one of the original traditional myths revolving around this flower first, and that actually came from Brazil. So in Brazil, there's a story where a woman had lost her husband due to some tragic event, and he had died. And so she fell down to the ground and began crying and weeping and screaming at the gods in anger and sadness. And the gods felt so bad for her that when her tears fell and hit the earth, it fertilized the ground. And from her tears grew passion flower. And that's kind of where the name for the passion part of passion flower came from. Not that it excites passions, but it helps to rectify passions that have been lost because of depression, sadness, or a loss. So that was really the first myth that came about it, or one of the first myths, and is the reason why that herb was so heavily used for people who had broken spirits or was going through a really stressful time that they couldn't handle. Now, when the Spanish conquistadors learned about its medicinal uses, they were amazed, but knowing that they had to take it back to Europe to be introduced to the Pope, because the church at that time kind of controlled the medicine world, like what was considered medicinal as well as like educational. So they had to come up with ways to make it represent, and that came, which you see a lot with Christian myths, is numerology. So when looking at the flower, they noticed it had five anthers, and anthers are the pieces that are right here, if you can see the screen. And anthers, the five anthers represented the five wounds of Christ, the three stigmas for the three nails used to hold him up during crucifixion. And the filaments and petals around it represented the thorny crown that Jesus wore during his crucifixion. So there was other ones like how the vine it doesn't hold very strong against things. It kind of loosely hangs onto it. And that represents God's kind of like grasp on holding the world and controlling it, where there's still free will to grow everywhere, but he still holds on to and nurtures the world. So then the flower's Latin name obviously came from the Spanish conquistadors or the Spanish cultural names, with passi coming from Spanish and Latin for variation for passion. Flora came from flos for flower, and incarnata meant flesh colored or flesh like. This was another representation towards the passion of Christ and Jesus because of the way he healed, and his flesh is used, the flesh of Christ, the blood of Christ within the Catholic Church. So that's how passion flower got its name, Passiflora Incarnata, because of those connections they had made with their religion. And that was so that the Pope would allow for this to become a medicinal herb. So like many plants, there's a lot of colloquial names for plants, and this one has a few as well. So other than passion flower, it's also known as maypop, apricot vine, passion vine, and passiflora. Now, passiflora just comes from the Spanish name for the herb. Passion vine, because it is a vining plant that grows and spreads. Apricot vine, because if you've ever seen the fruit when it's ripe and it's orange, it kind of looks like a little apricot that's hanging from a vine. And then the most fun one is maypop. The reason for that is when you went walking alongside these after they had gotten ripe and fell from the vine, when you stepped on them, they'd go pop. Hence the name maypop, because as you walk along them, they may pop. So the maypop is primarily just for the fruit. So if you ever hear maypop fruit, it's passion fruit or passion flower fruit. So that's just a few of their colloquial names and other names that have been given to it. So going back to some of the traditional uses by the natives of the Americas, So they would use a poultice made from decocted roots of the passion flower, and that would be used to apply to bruises, boils, wounds, lacerations, skin ailments. And it was thought to bring healing quicker, and they were using for pain relief. Then the vine, the leaves, and the flowers would all be used to create a tonic for nerves. So if someone had lost someone, if they were just so stressed they couldn't handle life, if they had lost their passions or will, some like kind of like what we would call anxiety and depression now, they would give this to them as a nervine tonic to help aid them through a stressful moment, a stressful time in life. And it was thought to calm them down so they could see clearly, think clearly, and then reignite, well, not really reignite, but open the doors of the heart so that the passion can flow forth again. So now that is the traditional uses, and you'll see that a lot of the traditional uses are still used today, though we don't use the root a lot in Western herbology. And I'm not sure why. Now that I've learned more about this of the root, like I use the leaf, the flower, and the vines a lot. But I might have to look into raising some of my own passion flower just so I can use the root and see how it works in formulations for bruises and skin ailments, especially as an esthetician myself. So in Western herbology, they've done a lot of studies on this herb, and we found that it's a hypnotic, analgesic, hypotensive, anxiolytic, antispasmodic, antidepressant, and nervine. So when we say hypnotic, we're not talking about one of those a hypnotist or a doctor swinging a little clock in front of your face and trying to get you to quack like a duck on the snap of their fingers. In herbology, when we say hypnotic, what we're talking about is that it helps to induce sleep. So it's not a sedative, but it has sedative properties to it, which makes it more of a hypnotic. The analgesic comes from its pain relieving property. A lot of that has to do with alkaloids that are found in it. And that's probably going to be really high in the root since that's what is being used traditionally for pains and bruises and other skin lacerations. Hypotensive means that it helps to lower blood pressure. Anxiolytic means it helps to address anxiety. Antispasmodic for its ability to help with spasms and stop spasming. Antidepressant works with the anxiolytics. And then it's a nervine, which we'll get into the nervine and a few of its other constituents in more detail in the next slides. So some of the constituents that they found in this herb are alkaloids, flavonoids, phytosterols, which is sterols found in plants, and maltol, amongst other ones, but these are some of the more prominent ones. So a nervine. So nervines are a class of herbs that are known to help sedate or relax the central nervous system. And the central nervous system is the brain and the spine. It's what receives all the messages from our peripheral nervous system and what sends messages to our outer extremities for movement as well. So this is a great herb to use because of that, working on the brain and the spine and the central nervous system. That's why it's so great for anxiety, stress, mental unrest, or anything to do with excessive thought and mental emotional stimulation. So if you're for anyone who very much like me, sometimes will lay in bed and you can't stop thinking about something that you just keep playing it over and over and over and it just won't go away. Or you start thinking about something like, oh, I wonder how that works. And then you're up till 2 a.m. going down rabbit holes about black holes. So if it's really going to help you calm the brain down so you can ease yourself into sleep. So when the CNS is overactive, or you may notice when it's overactive, overstimulated, anything in excess, you're going to notice some physical, behavioral, and or emotional changes. So when the CNS is overstimulated, physically you might notice things like body aches and pains, a rapid heartbeat, palpitation, nausea, dizziness, a lower libido, and a weak immunity. Behaviorally, you'll see changes in eating habits. This can mean either that they eat more than usual or they stopped eating completely or a lot less. And we all know there's some people who, when they're stressed, they eat a lot more. They just eat, and they munch and crave. And then we know that there's people who, when they're stressed out, they can't eat at all because their stomachs are in knots. You also have people who have issues with insomnia, falling asleep, or even staying asleep. They might have excessive fatigue. They might fall into addictive behaviors like smoking, drinking, other recreational drugs. They might have some nail biting or other nervous tics like pulling at the hair, picking at their skin, and even self-isolation from others. And that's a common one because when you feel so overstimulated, you just want to be in a dark room by yourself, even with Netflix on, maybe not even, but just so that you can cut off the rest of the world and be in your own little private bubble. Now, emotionally, we're going to see things like excess irritability. They're going to have shorter tempers. They're going to have a lot of agitation, inability to relax, the feeling of being overwhelmed. And even though you're people who have overstimulated CNS, they might isolate themselves. But when they are around other people, they might feel like they themselves feel lonely and isolated from the rest of the world because they're overstimulated and they're not able to connect with the people around them. And then obviously like a general feeling of unhappiness. Now this can be expressed as like melancholy, depression, just that feeling of like a dark cloud over your head and you don't know why. These are all things that are associated with an overstimulated or exerted CNS or central nervous system. So that's where passion flower comes into play and does a lot of great work to help out as a nervine to help relax these stressors and increase your mood. So some of the constituents that I had spoken about are your alkaloids, your maltol, and your phytosterols. So according to Science Direct and a few studies done by the NIH on mice with passion flower, they believe that these alkaloids are going to be in the harmalol alkaloid family, and this is due to its effect at sedating and calming the nervous system. And though they're not exactly sure how it's doing it, they do believe that passion flowers alkaloids play on the GABA receptor modulations. So that's what's helping them to relax and feel happy and kind of get out of their funk. The phytosterols, which again are sterols found in plants, are very important components found in herbs and that they're doing a lot of studies for because it is believed that these phytosterols are the ones that help to lower your LDLs, which are the bad cholesterol that causes heart damage. So this isn't what's usually used with passion flower. It's not something I've really seen in any, cardio health formulations, which amazes me. And now that's something that I think that I will work more into in working passion flower and seeing how it works in my formulations I already have for overall uh, being known to help with cardiac health. So they use it for that. And then the maltols, which have been primarily studied in ginseng, as ginseng has so much of it, but it's very similar to what is found in our passion flower. And these have been shown to help inhibit oxidative stress on the brain. So it's really great for brain health, keeping it going, running stronger, a clear mind, clear thinking, and just the health of your brain overall. So we know that there's parts of our body that we just oxidize. I mean, we breathe in oxygen, obviously, we're going to oxidize to a point, and that just comes with the aging process. And this helps to protect the brain from the oxidization that happens from free radicals. So there's a lot that could be going into this that could be used through the maltol alkaloids and phytosterols of this herb. And I'm excited to see where these studies go because there are countries that are still studying this herb for these properties.